Reports are emerging that a rift is widening amid growing tension between Prince Harry and King Charles.
The final thread connecting Prince Harry to the private world of the monarchy has just been severed. Behind a closed palace door, King Charles placed his signature beneath an order that did more than cancel a courtesy. It ended Harry's automatic right to enter restricted royal residences, stay under crown protection, and be received as a privileged family guest. And Meghan's reaction was immediate, furious, and deeply personal. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had signed a private royal order, a personal command issued through the monarch's household rather than Parliament. The action revoked Harry's final hospitality privilege, automatic accommodation inside designated royal residences, protected movement during approved visits, and entry into private family areas without a formal request. It did not remove his princely title, nor did it alter the line of succession, the legal order deciding who inherits the throne. But it destroyed his last practical claim to return as an insider. Inside Buckingham Palace's 1844 room, Charles read the final paragraph twice. The king tightened his fingers around the pen, paused over the signature line, then wrote his name with deliberate force. His private secretary remained silent until the monarch lowered the document and said, "There must be no exceptions." Charles did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The instruction converted a father's private heartbreak into a sovereign's unbreakable command. Across the world, Harry answered a terse call in California and listened without interrupting. The Duke asked the official to repeat the wording, hoping he had misunderstood the restriction. He had not. Every future request would face advance review by the sovereign's household, the staff managing the king's private and official affairs, alongside security commanders and William's office. As Prince of Wales, the title belonging to the heir, William would now have influence whenever Harry sought access to residences occupied by his family. Meghan began pacing before the call ended. She heard humiliation in every condition and demanded to know why her husband needed another man's approval to enter his own family's home. Harry lowered the phone but offered no answer. His silence unsettled her more than anger would have, because the Duke understood what the Duchess refused to accept. This was not a warning designed to frighten them. It was already final. Charles set the pen beside the sealed order and stared at the closed door. Meghan demanded an explanation, while Harry struggled to speak. Yet the real answer remained buried inside a confrontation at Windsor. A confrontation the palace had contained for months, recorded, and feared would one day force this exact decision. This was never merely a dispute about bedrooms, gates, or security escorts. For Charles, the privilege represented trust. For Harry, it represented belonging. For Meghan, it proved whether the monarchy still recognized the life and status she believed her family deserved. And for William, it had become a dangerous exception, one capable of reopening every private conflict the royal household had spent years trying to contain. Charles felt that conflict more painfully than anyone. As a father, he wanted his younger son to know that family affection had survived years of accusations and distance. As sovereign, the monarch responsible for controlling royal property and household security, he could not ignore the risks surrounding unrestricted access. Working royal residences were not simply family homes. They were protected buildings where official duties, confidential meetings, and private family life existed side by side. One careless exception could expose all three. Harry stared at the formal notice on the table before him. The Duke kept returning to 4 words: prior written authorization. That phrase meant he would now need documented permission before entering specified royal residences or staying under household protection. He read it again, slower this time, and felt something inside him collapse. However far he had moved from official duties, the old privilege had reassured him that he could still cross a royal threshold as the king's son. Now he felt like an applicant. Meghan reached for the notice and read the same paragraph. The Duchess's sadness quickly hardened into anger as she declared that the restriction was designed to make Archie and Lilibet feel unwanted. She demanded that her husband challenge it immediately. Harry did not respond. His hurt had turned inward, while her fury searched for someone to blame. That silence exposed a painful divide. She saw an attack demanding resistance. He saw confirmation that his former life had truly ended. William had already explained his fears in a documented security briefing delivered privately to Charles. The prince warned that unrestricted access could no longer be separated from confidential household planning or the safety of Catherine and their children. He was not asking the king to erase his brother. He was asking him to protect boundaries around the princess and the young family before another private visit became a crisis. Camilla had urged caution during a recorded conversation summarized by the monarch's secretary. The queen consort feared that another visible rupture would deepen Charles's grief and provoke a public battle with Meghan. Yet the king answered quietly that delay would only make the eventual break more brutal. Camilla heard certainty in his voice and understood the decision was already moving beyond emotion. Harry still needed to know what had made hesitation impossible. The answer waited at Windsor, where one locked entrance, one furious demand, and one sentence about royal birthright reached Charles before the evening was over. The decisive rupture began without cameras, ceremony, or warning. Harry arrived at Windsor expecting the familiar rules of family access to apply, only to find a security officer holding the inner door closed. What followed lasted less than 10 minutes, yet every word traveled directly to the king. By midnight, Charles was no longer asking whether the privilege should be restricted. He was deciding how permanently it should end. Harry had arrived nearly 40 minutes before the approved time for his privately arranged visit. The Duke asked to enter a restricted family corridor, leading toward the late Queen's private apartments, believing his former access still applied. Those apartments carried enormous emotional weight, because they held personal objects awaiting formal review. The inventory process, a controlled record of possessions, ownership, and storage, required the corridor to remain sealed until palace officials completed their work. The security officer stepped firmly between Harry and the inner entrance. He explained that authorization had to come from the sovereign's household, the team managing the monarch's private residences and official arrangements. Even close relatives could not enter while the restriction remained active. The Duke listened, glanced at the closed door, and replied that he had walked through that corridor since childhood. The officer apologized but refused to move. Harry felt embarrassment burn into anger. He insisted that he had never needed written permission to enter the family side of Windsor and demanded that someone telephone Charles immediately. The guard repeated the instruction, calmly but firmly. That refusal wounded the Duke more deeply than any public criticism, because it transformed a place filled with childhood memories into territory controlled by strangers. Meghan waited on the telephone as the exchange intensified. She urged her husband not to accept what she called deliberate degradation, arguing that surrendering at the entrance would validate every future restriction. Harry lowered his voice, but his answer carried through the corridor. "I should not need an appointment to enter my own family's home." The Duchess encouraged him to stand firm. Instead, he ended the call and stepped away from the door, humiliated and furious. The officer documented every word in the official security log, a written record used to preserve unusual incidents and decisions. One sentence carried extraordinary weight. Harry had declared that his birthright outranked a household restriction. The guard signed the account, added the time, and sent it through the protected reporting channel before the Duke had even left Windsor. Charles received the documented account that evening. The king circled the sentence about birthright, closed the folder, and told an aide that affection could never override control of the sovereign's residences. Yet he did not sign the revocation order immediately. The monarch summoned Harry to one final private meeting, offering his son a last chance to save the privilege. The locked entrance had exposed the wound. The next closed door would force father and son to say what neither had dared admit. No advisors sat between them when Charles and Harry finally faced one another. The king stood beside a cold fireplace, holding the Windsor security report. His son remained near the door, refusing the chair placed for him. Their disagreement began with access procedures, but within moments it became a reckoning over loyalty, public accusations, and whether family membership could survive after institutional trust had been shattered. Charles had invited his son to Clarence House, the king's official London residence, hoping privacy might soften the confrontation. He wanted firm boundaries without permanent exile. The monarch offered a compromise. Harry could stay at a royal property whenever personally invited, but each visit would require advance coordination through the household and security command, the officials responsible for protecting royal residence, buildings, and movements. It preserved family contact while ending automatic entry. Harry heard only rejection. The Duke told his father that conditional access was not family hospitality, and that requiring written permission reduced blood ties to administrative approval. Charles placed the security report on the table and answered with brutal calm. "You cannot leave the institution and return on your own terms." The institution meant the working monarchy, where public duty brings privileges but also demands rules, discretion, and accountability. Harry pushed the offered chair away. Its legs scraped across the floor, cutting through the room like a warning. He accused the palace of punishing Meghan through him, and claimed every new condition was designed to make the Duchess appear unwelcome. Charles flinched, then recovered. The king replied that Meghan was not the central issue, but his son refused to believe him. Years of resentment had entered the room, and neither man could force them back out. Charles opened a documented security review and revealed that Windsor was not the only concern. According to the written account, details from earlier planned visits had appeared in private communications before household officials completed their arrangements. That mattered, because premature information could disrupt protection plans and expose confidential family movements. The monarch would not identify the staff involved or release their correspondence, insisting that frightened employees should not become weapons in another public dispute. Harry demanded proof he could examine himself. The Duke accused his father of hiding behind anonymous officials, while the king replied that protecting staff confidence was part of protecting the crown. Charles then placed an unsigned revocation order on the table. The document, a formal command ending the privilege, would remain unsigned until morning. If his son accepted the compromise, it would disappear. If he refused, the final door would close. Harry looked at the page but never touched it. He left without accepting the offer, believing his silence might force Charles to reconsider. Yet William and Princess Anne were already waiting nearby. The prince had brought security concerns. The Princess Royal carried years of hard-earned judgment. Together, William and Anne were about to explain why another temporary solution would fail, and why the king's hesitation had become dangerous. The most consequential royal decisions are rarely made beneath chandeliers before a crowded council. This one unfolded around a modest table with 3 untouched glasses of water. Charles listened as William and Princess Anne explained why Harry's exceptional access could no longer survive. Yet the decisive moment did not come from constitutional language. It came when Anne asked her brother whether he was protecting his son from humiliation or merely postponing it. Charles understood that the disputed privilege existed through the sovereign's private household authority, the monarch's personal power to control access to royal residences. Parliament did not need to debate it, because the decision concerned private accommodation and security, rather than Harry's title or succession position. The king could grant, restrict, or withdraw that access with his signature alone. That freedom gave him control, but it also denied him somewhere else to place the blame. William spoke first. The prince explained that his concern was operational access, the practical control of who could enter buildings occupied by Catherine and their children. Advance warning mattered because protection officers needed time to secure rooms, routes, and private schedules. He feared that another unexpected arrival could expose the princess and the young family to confusion, leaked information, or a confrontation they had never agreed to face. Anne supported the warning with years of experience in household protocol, the rules governing royal conduct, access, and official procedure. The Princess Royal reminded Charles that security exceptions were rarely contained to one moment. Once granted, they became expectations. Once challenged, they became conflicts. She watched her brother repeatedly smooth the corner of the unsigned order, as though flattening the page might somehow soften what it demanded. Charles finally admitted what frightened him. The monarch believed the signature would be interpreted as a father rejecting his younger son, not a sovereign protecting his household. William answered carefully. He said refusing to establish boundaries would deepen Harry's belief that nothing had truly changed, leaving him shocked each time another privilege disappeared. The future king did not ask his father to stop loving his brother. He asked him to stop confusing love with unrestricted access. Anne placed her hand over the document. She told Charles that uncertainty had become cruel to everyone involved, including Harry. The Princess Royal's words ended the hesitation. The king approved a clause requiring William's office to be consulted before his brother entered any residence where Catherine or the children were staying. Yet he rejected language that could prevent private contact between father and son. Access would end. The relationship would not. Dawn brought the final blow. Harry's written response rejected the compromise unless Meghan received equal recognition in every future arrangement. The Duke framed the demand as protection for his wife. The Duchess saw it as a test of respect. Charles read the message once and signed. By the time California awakened, negotiation was over, and the new reality was already moving toward Meghan's door. Meghan expected resistance, but she did not expect finality. When the completed order arrived, she read it standing at a kitchen counter, while Harry remained seated several feet away. Her expression hardened at every restriction: written permission, security review, no automatic accommodation, no unapproved family access. Then she reached the final clause involving William's office, and the controlled silence in the room broke into unmistakable fury. Harry would receive no automatic room inside a royal residence, no household vehicle, and no police-supported movement arranged simply because he had returned to Britain. Police-supported movement meant travel coordinated with official protection officers rather than ordinary private security. The Duke would also be denied entry to private residential areas unless the invitation named those spaces directly. What had once happened through family custom would now require formal approval. Meghan read the conditions again. Every invitation would identify the precise property, arrival time, permitted areas, and length of stay, placing her husband under the same advance planning framework as a private guest. That framework was a security process used to approve movements before someone entered a protected royal location. To the Duchess, it looked less like protection and more like deliberate humiliation. Meghan struck the notice against the counter and accused the palace of allowing William to decide whether his own brother could enter the family home. She called the clause an insult disguised as procedure. Harry asked her to stop, but his voice was barely audible. The Duke did not defend the prince, nor did he challenge his wife. He simply stared at the signature that had transformed his childhood access into a vanished privilege. Harry remained seated after Meghan left the room. He folded the notice carefully along its original crease, then unfolded it, as though refusing to let the finality settle. Anger should have come easily. Instead, grief arrived. The Duke understood that he was mourning something he had assumed could never be taken, the right to return without asking whether he still belonged. Their communications advisor called within minutes and proposed an immediate public statement describing the order as vindictive. A communications advisor is the person who shapes public responses and manages how a dispute is presented. Meghan approved the language and urged its release before the palace controlled the story. The advisor waited for Harry's authorization. It never came. Harry turned the page and revealed what neither Meghan nor the advisor had noticed. Beneath the formal notice, Charles had added a handwritten sentence: "My door, as your father, remains open, but the crown's doors must have rules." The message came directly from the king's pen, leaving no official voice to blame and no courtier to accuse. Meghan called the sentence emotional pressure. Harry heard something else, a boundary wrapped around an invitation. The Duke refused the statement, dismissed the advisor, and asked to be left alone. Then, without staff, prepared words, or his wife beside him, he called Charles directly. For the first time, Harry stopped fighting the institution and reached for the man concealed behind the crown. Harry made the call after midnight, when there were no courtiers to blame and no prepared language to hide behind. Charles answered from his private sitting room. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then the younger son asked a question stripped of anger and ceremony. Had he been removed because he was no longer trusted, or because he was no longer loved? The king's answer shifted the entire conflict. Harry had used a private number reserved for immediate family, deliberately bypassing secretaries and communications teams. Courtiers were palace officials who normally carried messages, arranged meetings, and protected the monarch from sudden demands. None could interrupt now. The Duke asked that the conversation remain personal, and Charles agreed. They would speak as father and son, without debating titles, press coverage, or constitutional status, the formal position a person holds within the monarchy. Charles answered the painful question first. The monarch told Harry that trust had been damaged, but love had not disappeared. A private written account prepared after the call recorded his exact distinction. The order controlled access to royal buildings. It did not decide whether his son still belonged to the family. The Duke heard the words, yet years of anger made them difficult to accept. Harry asked whether Archie and Lilibet would now need permission to visit their grandfather. The question broke through Charles's control. The king replied that the children would never be treated as strangers, but their visits had to be protected from adult conflict, sudden publicity, and security confusion. Archie and Lilibet deserved time with family that was not overshadowed by arguments surrounding Meghan, William, or the palace. Charles then admitted that signing the order had caused him genuine pain. The monarch said the privilege might have survived under narrower conditions if Harry had accepted the earlier compromise. According to the same private account, the final demand for Meghan to receive identical access convinced him that temporary limits would always be challenged. The Duchess had become part of the dispute, but the king insisted she had not created every wound behind it. Harry finally confessed what happened at Windsor. The Duke explained that humiliation, not a desire to threaten security, had driven his confrontation at the locked entrance. He had felt like childhood, family, and identity were being taken from him in front of a stranger. Charles accepted the explanation without reversing the decision. Understanding could soften the wound. It could not erase the consequence. Harry promised he would not challenge the order publicly. He asked only that future invitations come directly from his father rather than through William's staff. Charles agreed, preserving one private path between them. The prince's office would still coordinate security, but the king himself would make the invitation. Father and son ended the call in exhausted peace. Their truce prevented an immediate family war, yet it arrived too late to contain the story. Outside the palace, the signed order had already reached the morning press, and their private loss was becoming a public royal spectacle. By sunrise, a private order had become a national argument. Broadcasters debated whether Charles had defended the monarchy or abandoned his son. Commentators treated Meghan's anger as evidence of a deeper battle over status, while crowds outside the palace stared at newspaper pages announcing the final break. Yet one image captured the public mood more powerfully than any expert panel: a closed royal gate beneath a headline about belonging. Palace communications issued a written confirmation before the morning broadcasts reached their peak. The administrative change, a practical alteration to access and security rather than a removal of title, was acknowledged, but officials refused to publish the private order or discuss Charles's correspondence with Harry. That silence protected father and son from further disclosure. It also created an empty space that broadcasters, commentators, and angry supporters rushed to fill. William instructed his staff to avoid triumphant language. The prince insisted that no briefing should describe the decision as punishment or victory, because the restriction concerned household governance, the system used to manage royal properties, employees, and security. He understood that one careless phrase could make him appear eager to exclude his brother. The future king wanted boundaries, not celebration. Yet public anger rarely respected such distinctions. Meghan watched a broadcaster describe Harry as a prince without a palace door. The Duchess immediately switched off the television and told her husband that their silence was allowing strangers to define their family. She wanted to answer before the phrase spread across every headline. Harry refused. The Duke told her he would not transform his father's handwritten message into another public confrontation, even if remaining silent made him look defeated. Meghan pressed him again, warning that restraint would be mistaken for weakness. Harry answered that attacking Charles now would destroy the only personal path left between them. The Duke had lost automatic access, but he had recovered a direct promise from his father. The Duchess heard surrender in that choice. He heard survival. Outside Buckingham Palace, a newspaper kiosk displayed the morning's most striking front page. A photograph of the closed central gates appeared beneath 4 enormous words: "The last key taken away." People stopped, read the headline, and began debating whether the king had protected the crown or humiliated his son. The image gave physical shape to an invisible loss. Harry still possessed his name, but no longer possessed unquestioned entry. A small crowd soon gathered near the Victoria Memorial, the monument facing the palace that honors Queen Victoria. Some defended Charles's boundary. Others called it unnecessarily cruel. Then, an elderly man placed a handwritten card against the rail. "A father may close a gate without closing his heart." He stepped back without speaking, leaving the sentence to answer the headline. That distinction changed the argument. The king had removed royal access, not familial love. Once the noise faded, the final verdict would depend on whether his signature represented punishment, protection, or painful acceptance. In the end, Charles did not remove Harry's name, erase his bloodline, or deny that he remained his son. He removed something subtler and, for Harry, more painful: the assumption that royal doors would always open regardless of past choices. Meghan saw humiliation. William saw protection. Harry eventually saw consequence. And the king accepted that preserving a relationship sometimes requires ending the privilege that has kept both sides trapped. Harry's automatic royal hospitality privilege was permanently withdrawn. That privilege had allowed the Duke to receive accommodation, protected movement, and private family access without applying as an ordinary guest. Every future visit would now require a personal invitation, an approved security plan, and clearly defined access. The decision left his title and family identity untouched. It separated who he remained by birth from what he could claim after leaving royal duties. Meghan remained angry. The Duchess believed the lost standing should have extended to her and their children, and she viewed the restriction as a public message about their diminished place. Yet she accepted Harry's refusal to launch another counterattack. The Duke had chosen to protect the fragile peace with his father, even if silence allowed others to call him defeated. Charles carried the wound differently. The monarch placed his copy of the signed order inside his private desk, rather than sending it to the working archive, the official storage system for active royal records. He did not want the paper treated like ordinary administration. To the king, it represented both a sovereign decision and a father's failure to preserve trust before rules became necessary. William received confirmation of Harry's acceptance through a documented household note. The prince had prepared an additional restriction that would have required separate approval for every movement near residences occupied by his family. He quietly withdrew it. The future king still believed firm boundaries were essential, but he no longer saw a complete ban as necessary. His brother's restraint had prevented the punishment from growing harsher. Weeks later, Charles sent a personal invitation in his own handwriting. The king offered Harry a private meeting at a neutral residence, meaning a secure property not permanently occupied by either side. No automatic privilege accompanied it. No exception was hidden inside it. The Duke accepted under the new rules, proving that contact could continue without entitlement, and that a closed royal gate did not have to become permanent emotional exile. Harry's life as a protected royal insider had ended. Meghan could not restore the standing she believed had been taken from them, and William no longer needed to defend the palace through escalating restrictions. Charles had established the boundary, while his son had finally accepted its cost. The monarchy emerged firmer, but not untouched. Harry learned that birth could preserve identity without guaranteeing access. The king learned that love without boundaries can become weakness, while boundaries without love become exile. The final privilege was gone, the royal dispute was settled, and one complete truth remained. Harry could return as Charles's son, but never again on the unquestioned authority of the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.